Hi, I'm Laura Cheney, and every quarter updates are made to Workforce One. A build to Workforce One will be happening on Thursday, September 30th, with many changes that apply to VRS. Today, I wanted to highlight some of those changes. I'm going to share my screen and give you a sneak peek. I've navigated to Workforce One, and I'm showing you these changes in our staging environment, so it mimics the live version. The first change I want to highlight is right on your dashboard. So there's now a column added to the dashboard titled Residential County, and this will show the county that the participant you're serving lives in. So that information is available right on your dashboard. The next change I want to highlight is on the eligibility page. So I've navigated to a record, and this participant has a pending application. So using the left navigation, I'm going to click on eligibility accepted, and then I'm going to hit the complete eligibility button. What you're going to notice about the page is that the fields have been reordered. So we've tried to streamline the process and not display questions if they are not needed. So the first set of fields is about Social Security eligibility. So I'm going to answer those. Then the next set is about the primary impairment. So you would select the impairment and the cause, and then you have the ability to enter in secondary information. Then you'll notice the question, is there a substantial impediment to competitive integrated employment? If I select no from the drop-down menu, you'll notice that my only option is to determine eligibility. If I say yes, then the fields populate where I can select the impairments that constitute or result in a substantial impediment to competitive integrated employment. And then you'll notice the question, person requires VRS to prepare for, secure, retain, advance in, or regain competitive integrated employment is there. So I'm going to select something up here. Again, from the dropdown, if I were to say no, you'll notice my only option is to determine eligibility. If I say yes, then the question, person is presumed to be able to benefit in terms of an employment outcome from VR services displays. The last change I want to make you aware of is in regard to participants that need a trial work. And I recognize that this does not happen very often, but I just want to show this update. So from this drop-down menu, if I were to select trial work is needed, what you're going to notice is that the page updates. It automatically puts the current date in the trial work date field, and you'll notice there no longer is a determine eligibility button. At this point, we aren't determining eligibility. We're saying we need more time for the trial work. So you'll notice my options are save as pending or save. So if I were to click save, then it would ask me, do you want to complete a trial work plan now? And you could move forward with that process if needed. So those were the changes to the eligibility page. The biggest thing being the way the questions are displayed, and that if you answer no, other questions may not appear. The next change I want to highlight is in regards to the employment plan. So I'm navigating to a record using my left navigation. I'm going to click on plan, and you'll notice I have a pending employment plan amendment. And on August 19th of 2021, there was a policy transmittal that indicated effective that date, employment plan approvals must be obtained by a manually executed signature or by using DocuSign. No other forms of approval are permissible for employment plans. So I want to show you that Workforce One has been updated. I'm going to click edit in the action column for the pending plan. And you'll notice here for the participant or participants authorized representative approval in the drop-down menu, my only two options are DocuSign signature approval or manual signature approval. So I'm going to go ahead and populate these fields. And I'm going to go ahead and save and activate the plan. And as always, you will get the confirmation modal asking if the participant or their authorized representative's approval is documented in Workforce One. I'm going to say yes. And now I have an active employment plan. The other change I want to review is in regard to participants that are under 18. So if I quick look at the demographics for this person, they are 17 years old. Workforce One knows that for participants under 18, their parent is signing the employment plan. So when I go look at the active plan, when I open the PDF to look at the printed version, and I go to that signature page, you're going to notice that the approval for the participant is going to display on the parent, guardian, conservator, authorized representative line, because Workforce One now recognizes that this participant is under 18. The next change I want to review is for an activity status. So let's go to this record. Using my left navigation, I'm going to click on activity. And you get to the activity summary. I'm going to add a new status. So from this drop-down menu, I'm going to select status. And for the activity type, we added services interrupted PBA. So this can be helpful for those participants who are in a PBA and perhaps their status is put on hold. This can be helpful to keep track of where the participant is in that PBA process. Can also be helpful in tracking the 120 days for those participants in an E1 PBA. The next change I want to show you is in regard to the consent forms. So I've navigated to a record, and using my left navigation, I'm going to click on consent, and this will bring me to the consent summary. So this will show the consents that have been added to the record. And you'll notice there's a column that indicates the consent status and then who the consent is made out to. So what's been added to Workforce One is the ability for staff to indicate that a consent form has been rescinded. So for example, we had a consent for Dr. Steve Stevens. So if the participant notified us that they no longer wanted that consent to be active, we can indicate that now in Workforce One. So in this action column, you would click rescind. You would put in the date that the participant indicated the consent was no longer valid, and you would click save. And on the consent summary for the consent status, it's going to indicate it's rescinded, and it'll show the date that it was rescinded. I would also encourage staff to make a note of this in the document summary. So using my left navigation, I'm going to click on document summary. And this record happens to have lots of documents. So I'm going to filter by the document name, consent for release of or exchange of information. And now it's only going to show those documents for the consent forms. So here is my form for Dr. Steve Stevens. In the action column for tags and comments, click tags and comments. And then you're going to click edit tags. And in this user defined document name, I would encourage you to indicate it's rescinded, the date it was rescinded, and then hit save. This is helpful if staff were to go out to the document summary before going to the consent summary. So now looking at the document summary, they can tell that this consent form for Dr. Steve Stevens was rescinded on September 28th, 2021. The next update I want to show you is in regard to the caseload detail report. So using this top navigation, I'm going to click on reports. Then I'm going to go to my caseload detail report. I'm going to search at the staff level for my caseload. I'm searching all activity types, all case status, basic and pre-ets. And now my caseload detail report is displaying. What I want to highlight is on the far right-hand side, a new column has been added called waiver. And this will help staff identify whether or not the participant is on a waiver. So you will see either a yes or a no. Some records may be blank, and that's because the question about the waiver has not always been a required field. So for example, if I knew that this participant was on a waiver, I can update that in Workforce One. So let's go over how to do that. So I'm going to navigate to this person's record. On the left navigation, I'm going to click Reporting Collection. And then in the action column, I'm going to click Edit. And here is the question. Person is on a waiver and seeking competitive integrated employment. So here I can say either yes or no. And then there's another required question, referred for individual placement support services or IPS. So you'll have to populate that if that question also was not populated. Then click Save. Now, when I run my caseload detail report, it will display the updated information. The other report I want to highlight is about caseload assignments. So it's a new report right here. It's called Current Caseload Other Assignments Detail. And this is helpful to know which staff are working with a record, not as a primary staff. So I think the most common way that this report is going to be run is at a staff level. And for example, if I wanted to know what records John Bradyhoff was assigned to as a secondary staff, I could indicate that. So it's going to let you run the report to see who is assigned as a secondary staff, a placement staff, support staff, or you could run it at primary. But I think the most common are going to be secondary or even support staff. So let's run it for secondary. You're going to notice it gives me the results. It'll show all the records that John is assigned as a secondary. It'll show who the primary staff is. If there are other staff assigned, the participant's name, record ID number, what activity they're in, etc. So this could be a nice report to help with staff who are working on a record in another assignment. The next change I want to show is in regard to the credential and MSG pages. So I've navigated to a record using my left navigation. I'm going to click on credential and I'm going to act as if I'm adding a credential. And what I want to highlight is that when we add a credential, we are required to add a document. And now Workforce One has been added, updated to include a case note. So in rare circumstances, there may be situations where there is a significant delay in getting a copy of the credential. In those situations, staff are able to still add the credential if they case note how the information was obtained. So you'll note there's a narrative here that indicates what needs to be included if we're going to document a credential using a case note. So this has been updated on both the credential and the measurable skill gain pages. The next change I want to highlight is for those staff that serve pre-ETS potentially eligible. So those are the participants that are in the pre-ETS referral status. A few months ago, we added an activity to indicate that the participant was in an inactive status. And what was happening is the staff were not able to get them back to the pre-ETS referral status. So this has been updated in Workforce One. So if I click add VRS status or NPS and add a status, now it'll let me put the participant back to a pre-ETS referral or to an active status. And then you can populate the date. And now they're back in an active referral status. And the last change I want to highlight is in regard to authorizations that are in a pre-issue status. So if you have an authorization that's in a pre-issue status and it's determined that authorization is no longer needed, in the action column, staff will now see a link to delete the authorization. So previously this was not an option, but now staff will see for pre-issue authorizations, if it's no longer needed, the ability to delete. If you have questions about any of these changes that I went over today, please let me know. Thanks.